on there. We've only had 4 people sign up so far. So you got till noon. Think about what you could do. So that was really fun, inspirational. So raise your hand if you're hungry for some science. Yeah, here you go. Here you go. We got Brian here. And Brian's with Nature Conservancy, which is a global organization. And, when we're talking about partnering up, it's interesting. Different organizations and the many different things that we do. And I have something in common with Brian that he probably doesn't know, that we have the same look in the program. I'll leave it up to you if you want to do the research. We both have a paddle in our hand on our picture.
Thanks. It's great to be with you all this morning. It's been a number of years since I've had a chance to come down to the Fox River Summit, so really enjoying being here. Mike, that story was fantastic. I grew up with a family of paddlers, and they did a lot of crazy trips. My uncles and my dad, so really cool to see that going on. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about some of our work in the Mukwonago River Watershed. I gotta say, I'm really happy that I saw so many hands in the air, that you're hungry for science. It's a little, little intimidating following that fun story here. So this year, my name is Brian Miner. I'm the Southeast Wisconsin Stewardship Coordinator for the Nature Conservancy. One of the main projects I work on is managing our preserves in the Mukwonago River Watershed. And this year, we've updated our aquatic plant management plans, and that's a great time for us to reevaluate the approaches we're using to manage the aquatic plants on our preserves in both the lakes that we manage in Pickerel Lake and Lulu Lake, and the wetlands in the upper Mukwonago River system. So a couple of those, I want to share just a couple of those approaches that we've taken over the last 25 years that have been really successful. So just a little bit of background around our work. All right, I'm just going to use the computer. There you go. That works. All right. So the Nature Conservancy is a global organization. We have programs across 76 different countries and territories across the world. We work right here in Wisconsin as well. We work all over the state. These are current projects, including the Mukwonago River Watershed project. So our focus here is protecting the diversity within the river system, as well as the oak savannas that are globally rare and globally rare fen wetlands. So the Mukwonago River is the most diverse small stream system in Wisconsin, and it is one of the most diverse small stream systems in the whole upper Mississippi River Basin. There are 56 species of fish, 15 species of mussel, and to put that in context, in the upper Mississippi River Basin, there's 45 species of mussel. Most of those are in the Mississippi River itself. And so 15 species in a very small stream system is really an incredible amount of diversity. So TNC's approach in the watershed is kind of threefold. We try to provide the best science we can for local decision makers, so that they can do land use planning, restoration planning. So really we try to advocate for the use of science in decision making. And then we also try to drive forward that science, working with partners, working with researchers as well. The second is land protection. So all of these green areas in here are lands that we've protected in the watershed, about 3,000 acres. We focus in the upper part of the watershed north of Lulu Lake, or sorry, upstream of Lulu Lake and around Pickerel Lake. Everything that happens in the headwaters has major effects downstream. So we really focus on protecting the headwaters, protecting key groundwater recharge areas, which is important for places like fens that depend on that groundwater, and then key stretches of the river itself. I'm not going to talk much about our protection, but I do want to highlight that almost all of this land here that we've protected has been supported by the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund. This is one of our great examples of how that program has worked extremely well in Wisconsin. Not only does it work well in Wisconsin, it has been a model for other states. TNC has been working with lawmakers in other states to try to create funding programs like this. So the first project I'm going to talk about is managing Eurasian water milfoil in Lulu Lake. So Lulu Lake is a 95-acre kettle lake. It has a maximum depth of about 40 feet. And most of the vegetation is really around the outside of the lake because vegetation grows to about 10 or 15 feet. It's connected to Eagle Spring Lake via the Mukwonago River. So Eagle Spring Lake and Lulu Lake form kind of a closed system in terms of aquatic plant management. In 2022, is designated a high-quality lake, which really just confirmed what we already knew about the lake. This was identified in the late 80s as the early 80s as a really important place for conservation. A quick story, I was out at Lulu Lake showing some new staff the preserve and some of the projects we have going on. And we stopped to talk to a family that was out on the trail. And the woman said, well, this is my dad here, and he's the reason why this place exists. And it turns out he was none other than our former state director who negotiated the first conservation easements in the area. So we had a wonderful visit with him and got to hear a little bit more about the protection that I didn't even know about. So we have been protecting the west shore of Lulu Lake since 1985 and have been managing aquatic plants in the lake since at least 2000. In 1994, Eurasian water milfoil was first identified in Eagle Spring Lake, and it started impacting Lulu Lake in around 1998. We did do some genetic testing in 2019, so we started throughout our management. We were finding plants that kind of looked like northern water milfoil, which is a native species, and Eurasian water milfoil. These plants had just the leaflets didn't look quite right. And so we realized that we needed to understand whether this was a true Eurasian water milfoil or whether it was a hybrid. So we did some genetic testing and found actually all of our samples from Lulu Lake are a hybrid that are unique to the Lulu Lake, Eagle Spring Lake system. So at Lulu Lake, it doesn't have much of an effect on our management, except that we know if something looks like northern water milfoil, it probably is the hybrid. The other major impact that this has for management in other lakes is that, and particularly at Eagle Spring Lake, is that the hybrid is actually more resistant to chemical control. So it changes how you have to actually manage the plants. But we actually don't do any chemical control in Lulu Lake, and the reason is because it's a highly diverse lake. So we have 32 species in the lake that we've surveyed since 2005. We have one of the concepts we use is called the coefficient of conservatism, and that's every plant gets designated a number 1 to 10. 10 being most conservative, meaning it has a really narrow environmental window where it can grow. So anything over 5 is a pretty conservative species, and you notice there's a lot of 6s and a lot of 7s on this list of species here. So it needs that high water quality that we have in the lake. In 2005, there was a point intercept survey done, and you can see all these red areas are where the Eurasian water milfoil was, and it's impacting the native plant community there in terms of overtopping them, shading out the sunlight, and overcrowding and taking the resources. So our management goals here were to monitor both the native and exotic species in the lake, reduce the cover of milfoil, of invasive milfoil, and prevent reinvasions. So without using chemicals, the basic approach here has been use hand harvesting. So we do this from canoes. We get out and do some snorkeling and hand pulling, wading, and then we've had divers in the water for many years. And one of the things you might notice is that there's a lot of people involved in here. There's actually only 2 divers in this picture who are doing the hand pulling. So everybody else we kind of have this flotilla around the divers, and they're grabbing all of the pieces of milfoil that break off as they're harvesting. So with aquatic plants, and in particular Eurasian water milfoil, any part of the plant can break off, and then if it floats away, it eventually sinks into the sediment and it can reroot. So this is one of the challenges with doing mechanical only treatments, is that you're going to continue having reinvasions. And so this is one way of trying to prevent that, is everybody in there with pool skimmers and skimming off all the milfoil that breaks off and floats away. So a lot of hard work. So in 2020, we decided to try something a little bit different. We contracted with Eco Waterways to do some dash harvesting. This is diver-assisted suction harvesting. It's a hand harvesting approach where a diver is in the water doing the exact same thing, hand pulling all the plants, getting the roots and the whole plant together. The only difference is the way we collect the plants, and they use a high-powered suction hose. And they just put the plant right in the suction hose, and it puts them in these bags. So this is the haul from 2020, and that is more than, in 2 days, 3 days of work on the lake. That's more than we had ever harvested in a single season. So it's really, really efficient. So the upside of this is it's really efficient, and if you've got a good diver in the water who can hand pull the milfoil, if you have a really diverse suite of plants, they can really target just the milfoil and get it all collected and get it out of the water. The downside is it's really efficient, which means that if you don't have a good diver in the water and they're just pulling plants, they don't have a great ID of the plants that they're pulling, you can really actually do damage to the native population there. So it requires some good skill on the diver's part, but it is really effective. And this is the progression over the last 5 years or so of their work. So you can see that the work area has diminished quite a bit over the last few seasons, to the point where in 2026 we're going to skip the dash harvesting because these areas in yellow and the couple of red points that we have are the only remaining populations of milfoil in the lake. And you compare that to that first map I showed you. All of this area had milfoil, and then all along the shore there. So over the last 25 years, we've been able to really reduce the amount of milfoil in the lake, and the dash harvesting has been really key to that. But just reducing it isn't quite enough. We need to do something so that the milfoil isn't repopulating the same areas. Otherwise, we just kind of spin our wheels. So we worked starting in 2009. Dr. Tim Gerber from UW-La Crosse came out to help us really develop a more comprehensive program. And one of the things he wanted to try was to figure out if there was a material we could put on the bottom of the lake that would suppress the milfoil growth. So in a couple of areas where it's only milfoil growing, you're harvesting basically everything, and then you're getting regrowth every year. So he worked with our high school interns at the time, and they found that a coconut fiber woven mat actually suppressed the milfoil. So they tried them in these buckets here. They're about 2.5 foot in diameter, and they found it worked really well. Reduced the growth by about 5 times. And so then they tried it out in the lake, and they had the same response in the lake. So this coconut fiber mat goes down right after we do the hand pulling, and it really helps reduce the amount that the milfoil is regrowing. So the next question they had is it possible to actually revegetate the bottom of the lake with native plants using that same strategy? So like milfoil, most native plants, any part of the plant will reroot itself if it is held into the sediment. So what they decided to do is take pondweed species, Illinois pondweed, and a couple other species, and they wove them right into the mats. And place those mats down on the surface, and then you can see here there's a frame, there's a wooden frame that holds things down in place, and then we pull that frame up at the end of the season, and then it's just kind of held in place with a couple of rocks. Thanks. And so this was really, really successful. We treated between 2016 and 2019, we treated 8 square meters. And immediately within that 8 square meters, it's mostly Illinois pondweed and a couple other species that have grown in there. The mats degrade within about a season or two. And then the next year, what we started noticing is the areas that we did not treat with the mats are they've got quite a bit of milfoil out there. So we found this to be really successful. It's an approach that that I think has some promise, and in 2026 we're going to try to expand that out a little bit and see if we can do larger mats and what kind of area we could actually treat with those. So the key takeaway here is that hand harvesting is a really viable option for milfoil control, especially in areas where we have native plant populations that we don't want to impact with chemicals. And then the diver-assisted suction harvesting can really greatly improve the efficiency. And finally, this woven mat has a lot of promise and can be used to help reduce those reinvasions of milfoil. So we've only got about 5 minutes left, and I have one other project I want to share with you. So I'm just going to kind of skim over the top of this. I could go super deep into this, but I'm going to try to do my best to just kind of skim over this. So at Pickerel Lake and Lulu Lake, we have an issue with invasive cattail. So narrow leaf and hybrid cattail are a real problem, particularly in areas where we have a lot of fen vegetation. So calcareous fens are places where the groundwater is pushed through calcium-rich limestone, and it brings that calcium to the surface. There's a whole suite of plants that are called calciphiles that actually depend on that calcium-rich groundwater. And then these fens are also nutrient poor, so they don't have a ton of plant available nitrogen. So we also see some really cool species like pitcher plants and sundew, carnivorous species that are often associated with bogs are also found in these fens. Fens are very small because they're dependent on that groundwater coming in and welling up. And then they're often pretty separated by quite a bit of a distance. So they can very easily be outcompeted and replaced by invasive cattails. And so you see that in this picture here, we have a couple of fens here, and all of this is cattail around the lake. So for this project, we worked with Integrated Restorations, and they developed this technique. They refer to it as a cut comb technique. If you've ever worked on buckthorn and done a cut stump treatment, it's basically the same thing. You mow down the cattail and then they use a imazapyr, thanks, and treat the individual stems. And they get 90% control in just one season. And then they do a follow-up treatment the next season, get about 99% control. So here you can see the dead stems all throughout this wetland next to all the sensitive native species in there. So we're using a non-selective herbicide, but the method is able to really target just the cattail, and it becomes really a selective treatment. So we did this at Pickerel Lake from 2017 to 2019, followed up with some prescribed fire. And most importantly to note here, we did no supplemental seeding. The results were absolutely staggering. So pre-treatment surveys, they found 35 species. Post-treatment surveys 2 years later, they found 85 species. So those species that they found in the second treatment, those were just being suppressed by the cattails. And once the cattails were removed, that fen was able to recover. This is a pretty amazing response. And so Integrated Restorations has been just publishing a paper on the comparison between managed wetlands and unmanaged wetlands. And they found that our managed wetlands that we've been managing with this technique are most similar to our reference wetlands at Clover Valley State Natural Area. So this is a really useful technique in places where there's a species-rich environment, but cattails are invading. And I don't think we have any time for questions here, but come see me up later.